Welcome to English 430 and 560. These are the podcasts for Shakespeare's drama, produced by and starring Dr. Bill Dines.
We're coming to this play, The Life of King Henry V, immediately after having talked about the first part of King Henry IV. But of course, for Shakespeare's audiences, several years had passed since they had seen Prince Hal in action at the Battle of Shrewsbury. And this gap raises some legitimate questions about the relationship between the two plays. Renaissance playwrights were as conscious of the value of sequels as modern Hollywood producers are. But scholarly debate still continues about the intentionality behind this second tetralogy of Richard II, Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and Henry V. To what extent does this play depend on those previous plays, not to mention The Merry Wives of Windsor, a comedy that starred Sir John Falstaff? And to what extent should it stand alone? In the play's opening scene, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Bishop of Ely seem to put aside the earlier plays, pointing out that the young king was just transformed upon the moment of his father's death. But even as late as Act 4, in his prayers before the Battle of Agincourt, King Henry reminds us of the circumstances that have led us here. As you read the play, then, I won't ask you to forget all that you've learned about Prince Hal from King Henry IV Part 1. After all, you've got a midterm coming up. But we will talk about what similarities and what differences you see between that prince and this king. The historical context for the creation of the play is really quite interesting. Having lost their lease for the theater at Shoreditch, and apparently locked out of the private hall that they had hoped to use as a playing space in Blackfriars, in December of 1598, the Lord Chamberlain's men quietly, their landlord said illegally, had the theater dismantled and its superstructure moved across the Thames River to the Bankside area. In the early months of 1599, the theater was reborn as the Globe, which was open for business by that summer. While all of this was going on, William Shakespeare was writing Julius Caesar and King Henry V. The Lord Chamberlain's men went through one other really important transformation during this period. Will Kemp had been the principal comic actor for the company at least since the early part of the 1590s, and almost certainly was the original Falstaff. In 1599, he quit. We don't know why Kemp left the troupe at this point, although James Shapiro, in his book A Year in the Life of William Shakespeare, suggests that Shakespeare's comedy was increasingly growing away from the slapstick and broad physical and improvisational humor with which Kemp was most comfortable. One of the epilogues of the second part of King Henry IV promises, quote, "Our humble author will continue the story with Sir John in it," end quote. But with no Will Kemp, there just wasn't going to be a Sir John Falstaff in this new play. Politically, Queen Elizabeth is 65 in 1599. 11 years after the triumph over the Spanish Armada, and unable to cope with a series of plague years and bad harvests, Elizabeth had lost a good deal of the popularity that she had enjoyed as Gloriana or Good Queen Bess. Because she had never had a child or even named a successor, the English were understandably anxious about who would take over after her death, an anxiety that's really close to the surface in all of Shakespeare's history plays. It's also in 1599 that Sir Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex and long one of Elizabeth's favorites, leaves with an army for Ireland, where he plans to bring that country under English control once and for all. You don't need to know much about English-Irish history to guess how badly that round of fighting eventually turned out. But in the summer of 1599, English confidence is really quite high. You'll hear an echo of that in the chorus that opens Act 5. Henry V, then, was written for a tumultuous period of fresh starts, new beginnings, but it was also a period with a strong undercurrent of loss and foreboding as well. In this introduction, I want to mention three themes that I think will help us explore this play. Two of them are themes that we've had occasion to talk about already: the performative nature of identity and the dual nature of the king. The third, the question of nationhood or community, may be a little less familiar to us, but it's one that Shakespeare will be interested in throughout his career. In order to talk about the play's interest in identity and performance, let's focus on the prologue. At one level, this is a traditional apology. The actors pretend humility to ingratiate themselves with the audience. But as with Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream or Rosalind in As You Like It, Shakespeare is not content here to simply stick with a single layer. Notice the way that the chorus prepares us for our role in what's coming.
Here's Timothy West as the chorus in a performance for Naxos Audiobooks.
Oh, for a muse of fire, that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat unraised spirits that hath dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France, or may we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon. Since a crooked figure may attest in little place 1,000,000, and let us, ciphers to this great account, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined 2 mighty monarchies, whose high uprared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts divide one man, and make imaginary puissance. Think, when we talk of horses, that you see them printing their proud hooves in the receiving earth, for 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings. Carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me, chorus, to this history, who, prologue-like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play.
What strikes me here is the emphasis on the importance of the audience's imagination and the limitations of the player's abilities. The chorus asks us to realize that the performance cannot continue without all of our participation. Compare this with the ways that throughout the play, King Henry will be both performing himself and directing others, countrymen and enemies alike, in their own performances. As you read the play, think about the questions of complicity that this familiar theme raises here. This emphasis on performance then focuses on the nature of the king. My students generally find this character pretty frustrating, either because they don't know what to make of him, or because they're quite certain he's just a lying, manipulative deceiver out for his own good. This problem of interpretation is neatly captured in 2 of the finest films of any Shakespeare play, Sir Laurence Olivier's 1944 and Kenneth Branagh's 1989 films. Olivier, aiming to encourage British patriotism and confidence at the end of World War II, gives us a brilliant, patriotic Henry, a king who manages to rally his people and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Branagh, on the other hand, reflecting the darker mood at the end of Margaret Thatcher's ministry, gives us a colder, more manipulative king. As we explore this play together, we'll be talking about both of these interpretations a good deal. And I may not be giving too much away if I suggest now that I think, both of them are right. The third theme that I'd like you to be thinking about as you begin this play is the question of nationhood or nationality. In its most particular sense, this is the question, what does it mean to be English under King Harry? In its most general sense, this is the question, what does it mean to belong to a community? Hal's father introduced us to the local problem in King Henry IV, Part 1, when he dreamed of quelling civil wars and leading a united kingdom on a holy crusade. At the end of 2 Henry IV, the dying Henry makes this a specific recommendation to his son, saying, quote, "Be it thy course to busy giddy minds with foreign quarrels, that action hence borne out may waste the memory of the former days." End quote. In Henry V, the war with France appears to do just this. Harry appeals to national unity when he invites his band of brothers to stand with him at Agincourt, promising that those who shed their blood with him, quote, "shall be my brother," end quote. Similarly, the 4 captains, Gower, Fluellen, Macmorris, and Jamie, represent the 4 nations that will one day make up Great Britain, England, Wales, Ireland, and Scotland, respectively. The impression, then, is that under Henry's leadership a new national identity is being forged, one which unites high and low, English, Welsh, Irish, and Scot all together. Yet as we talk about this play, let's be cautious and honest about the gaps and omissions in this approach. Perhaps the most obvious is the distinct lack of women. If a new national identity is being created here, that identity is a decidedly masculine one. Moreover, the sympathies and the unities that King Henry manages to create tend to be transitory, rather perfunctory. They're every bit as theatrical as the ceremonies and rituals upon which the king depends for his authority. Pay careful attention especially to the one soliloquy that Shakespeare gives King Henry. Before the Battle of Agincourt in Act 4, Scene 1, Henry acknowledges the limitations of his royal authority and admits that all that separates him from the commoners is mere, quote, ceremony, end quote. But he also complains that this ceremony is what keeps him from rest while petty laborers sleep away their cares. How much sympathy do you have for King Henry at this moment? How sincere do you feel his prayer really is? How you answer questions like that will have a lot to do with your response to the play as a whole.